Hello everybody, this is Freaky Games, aka Touch the Stick, and today I'm doing an updated week 2 slash week 3 of season 6 on the V system I think you should use in each matchup. A lot of it actually has changed for me. Previously, in my other V system guide, I was using V-Skill 1 V Trigger 1 for a lot of the characters. I have since season 6 has made V Skill 2 and V Trigger 1 I think very potent together. I think a lot of those matchups have changed to more V Skill 2. Also, shoutouts to the Falke Discord because they had been recommending for the Ryu and Gil matchup to use V-Skill 2, and I've recently been doing that, and it's felt a lot. I mean, those matchups already felt good, but I definitely feel like I even have a little, like just that little bit extra more control. So, shoutouts to them. They were 100% correct. So, without further ado, let's start. Abigail. For Abigail, I like to use V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1. The reason being, V-Skill 2 is very easy to get out. Just be careful that you don't do it within his sweep range. It's great control for him. V-Trigger 1 goes through his armored moves. Most of them. He can still kind of EX run through it, kind of, but he has to be, like, really close to you to do it. So and since he's very tall, it's very hard for him to actually dodge V Trigger 1. So I just think it's a superb combo versus Abigail. I literally have like no issues in this matchup usually, except for to a player named Hornswoggle. Shout out to him. He's like the only Abigail that ever like has ever given me any trouble. So good stuff to him. Oh, and Ragley. Ragley's been getting better too. So shout out to the Ragley. His Abigail's starting to look pretty sweet. Anyways, going on to Alex. Alex, I like to use V Trigger 2, V Skill 2. The reason being, V Skill 2, same thing as Abigail, very good control. The reason why I don't use V Trigger 1 is just because Alex can EX knee, whatever it's called, and get Oki off of it if you try. So I don't think it's very good. V Trigger 2 also, if you hit confirm, if you're in the corner, it gets you out of the corner, and I think not being cornered by Alex is very important in this matchup. I think you only really lose to Alex if you do get cornered. So I think having a tool that like automatically gets you out if you can hit confirm it or combo into it or what have you, even if he whiffs something big, you might even be able to just raw activate and punish it. So that's why I use that combination. Blanca, I also use V Skill 2, V Trigger 2. Similar kind of reasoning. I don't think V Trigger 1 is very good versus Blanca. V Skill 1 just does absolutely nothing in the matchup. Same thing with V Skill 1 versus Alex as well. It just doesn't do anything. The reason and V Trigger 2, a lot of the time, Blanca can actually zone Falke, so it's a rough matchup. So just having the extra damage with your pokes or having the overhead is just kind of a nice addition to the matchup to try to make it less bad. Vega. Vega, I also play V Skill 2, V Trigger 2. I think you could potentially get away with V Trigger 1. The problem is his V Skill 2, I do believe, I could be wrong, but I do believe it goes through V Trigger 1, so it's not the best. And same thing, if Vega's corners you, it's actually kind of hard for Falke to get out of that, so the V Trigger 2 allows you to get out. It's actually hard to get V Skill 2 out in this matchup, like just raw without, like, confirming your stand medium kick into your heavy kick. But same kind of thing. It's just that V Skill 1 is just utterly useless. So it's better to have something that you probably won't be getting out too much in the matchup, but at least it's something. Moving on to Birdie. Birdie boys, same as Abigail. V Skill 2, V Trigger 1. Same kind of thing. Blows through armor. Birdie doesn't have like a really good way to deal with V Trigger 1. From 3/4 of the screen to full screen, you can get V Skill out to pretty consistently. He has to do like it's very hard for him to react and punish you on it. He has to make like a hard read that you're going to do it. Or he has to be walking forward and do his little dive, his little underdive thing. So it's very good control. Honestly, I don't. Also, the reason why I don't think he would really run V Trigger 2 is, his crouching medium punch or whatever the button is for those little headbutt from his anti-air still kind of blows you up. He's got anti-air chains and stuff like that. I just think V Trigger 1's just better. It blows up the armor. It prevents him from using V Trigger 1 on you as efficiently, so it makes that situation a little less scary, so that's also why I like it. Balrog, you have to play V Skill 2, V Trigger 2. The reason why is V Skill 1 is basically useless. V Skill 2 at least allows you to get some space, hopefully. V Trigger 2 you're playing because his V Skill 1 and his just dash upper goes through V-Trigger 1, so it's just kind of useless, so you have to play V-Trigger 2 by default. Also, same thing, you get cornered, you can get out. Cody. So last season I had Cody at V-Skill 1, V-Trigger 1 to absorb fireballs. I've recently, since the update here, I've been using a lot of V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1 for matchups instead of the V-Skill 1, V-Trigger 1 that I used to do, and I actually find I prefer it. Now, being able to absorb Cody's fireball and get your V-Trigger 1 faster is really awesome, but the V-Skill 2, I just believe that, like, Falke has so many ways around his fireball and fireballs in general anyways. I think V-Skill 2 is just kind of better for, like, that little bit of control. I think it's also kind of hard to actually, like, without getting Oki or whatever, it's actually hard to get out, but you can get a knockdown, you get a stun or something, you get V-Skill 2. I think it's really potent this season, and I think it's better than playing V-Skill 1 and V-Trigger 1 for most matches. So there's that. The reason why you play V-Trigger 1 and not V-Trigger 2 is both of Cody's V-Triggers actually stop both of our V-Triggers, which sucks, but he's got a really good crouch heavy punch as well. I just don't think V-Trigger 2 is all that viable. Play it if you want. It might be. I could be wrong, right? But for me, I prefer V-Trigger 1. Just adds a little bit of damage. It also allows me to do like target combo into V-Trigger 1, and then I go from minus 14 to plus 4 in his face. So that's something I've really been doing this season that I really, really like. Cammy, V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2. Even though she's nerfed, I think V-Trigger 1, it's too easy for her to get around it. She can just EX Spiral. She could, like, if you jump, if she's looking for it and you jump, she could critical or something like that. She could DP you, EX DP through it. She could DP your V-Trigger 2 as well. But V-Trigger 2 gets you out of the corner, which is really important if you get cornered by her. The damage output from it's very nice. It allows all your pokes to go into more damage. You play V-Skill 2 because V-Skill 1 is just kind of useless. Or if you wanted to, I think also still play, because I did experiment with this. I think V-Skill 1, V-Trigger 1 is okay versus Cammy. It's okay, but I think this is just slightly better. Chun-Li. I think so. Last season, I had Chun-Li here. Now I still play this layout for Chun-Li. However, I do believe it doesn't matter. I think you can play whatever you want against Chun-Li. V-Skill 1 is good for Fireball. V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 is good because if she throws like an EX Fireball, you can reflect it, so that's good. You could play V-Skill 2 for more control from neutral if you get like a crush counter forward heavy punch or something on her, so that's good. I think you can play any kind of combination. I think it's pretty good versus her. She doesn't really have a great answer to V-Trigger 2 or V-Skill 1, or V-Trigger 1, so I think it doesn't matter this season. You play whatever you want. Similar thing to Dawson, play whatever you like. V-Skill 1, I would only... I mean, V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 1 I think is absolutely useless versus him, because you're not really... I mean, potentially, I guess you could reflect an EX Fireball, so I shouldn't say it's useless, I just don't think it's great, but if he's throwing fireballs at you, you could V-Skill 1, gain V-meter, go into V-Trigger 2 faster, or go into V-Trigger 1, try to pin him down. So I think you could do that, or you can maybe try to set up the V-Skill 2 orb and get some control, potentially, or get him, at least to move himself towards corner, even though he's going to teleport out. Ugh. So, but I don't think it matters. You play whatever you're comfortable with in this matchup. Ed. Okay, so Ed is the only one I've not tried V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1 with, but I really think comboing into it with V-Skill 1 and activating the V-Skill 1 is still really powerful and potent versus him. I think you could totally play V-Skill 2 and be fine, honestly. I just don't really, in the matchup, like the way I play the matchup, I just don't see I don't really need the V-Skill 2. I don't really see its points. Because I'm never going to space myself where I can get V-Skill 2 out and not expect him to just try to dash up or something. Also, his V-Skill 1 does counter the V-Skill 2, so I wouldn't really do it because of that as well. Or he could try to dash up or jump, and I think it's just kind of a riskier play. I'd rather just be able to absorb his like one little fireball. You could also play V Trigger 2 V Skill 1 and just reflect Ed's V Trigger 1, but I think for utility wise, I think V Trigger 1 is better because he, besides trying to like react to the jump, he has no way of dealing with our V Trigger 1, and our V Trigger 1 can just absorb hits of his V Trigger 1 if we have to. Again, you can play V Trigger 2 if you want, but I think trying to go for like an overhead in that trigger versus Ed's a terrible idea. He's got like two good anti-air normals. He's got EX upper. He's got the Psycho Rising special. I don't think it's a good idea. If you want to tackle more damage with your pokes with V Trigger 2, I mean I could see that, but I mean this matchup to me is just complete keep away, and I don't think you need to. I don't think you need V Trigger 2 for a comeback factor. Most of the time you should be winning. So, and if you do need a comeback factor, V Trigger 1 puts him in animation lock for 3 hits. So I'm just, I think it's just better. On to Fang, V Trigger 2, V Skill 2. I don't. V Trigger 1, he can just EX command dash through or regular command dash. I think it's regular, but I think he can EX command dash through. He's also got the floaty jump thing that he does. I just don't think V Trigger 1's very viable. V Skill 1 V-Skill 1 I think is okay, but I like V-Skill 2 because it does actually push him back, and it allows you to gain space on him that you desperately need. Same reason why you're playing V-Trigger 2 is just the damage output. He doesn't have a great way of dealing with the overhead, so it's really good for that. It extends your damage pokes, so I think V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2 is the way to go. I played this last season. I still think this is correct in the mirror match. V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1. You're not going to be able to V-Skill. You're not going to be able to use V-Skill 1 for anything except for to go into activation to V-Trigger 1. And with the new buffs this season, you don't really need to do that. So, V-Skill 2 allows control, which I think is more important. The reason why you're not going to play V-Trigger 2 is because if you're a decent Falke and you're fighting another decent Falke, you guys know how to counter it. And you guys know you could just wait. You could crouch heavy punch it. You could EXDP it, so there's no real point, or you could just block it and then V reversal or something. Like, it's just, I don't think it's very good. V Trigger 1, you'll at least get probably 2 of those around. I think it's more important, and you get more utility use out of V Trigger 1 in the mirror match. G, I'm sticking with what I had last season. V Trigger 2, V Skill 1. You're only using this combination to counter his V Trigger 1, which I think is really important. He shoots out V-Trigger 1 orbs. If you're in V-Trigger 2, you reflect it. I think you could actually use V-Trigger 1 because against GN it's a pretty decent idea because he is a pretty tall character. However, I just like the ability to reflect his V-Trigger 1 and not have to deal with as much crap from that as possible as other characters do. So I try to reduce the risk of losing to that as much as possible because in the matchup that's the only thing I'm actually worried about. So. I think that's why you'd play that. You could play V-Skill 2 and V-Trigger 1, or I think you could play almost any combination and be okay, but I think this is definitely the optimal way to do it. Akuma, I used to play V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2. Shoutouts to, I think his name is Oh My Chuck, or Chuck Steak. GM Akuma, I played him, and he just kept parrying it. I would try to go for the overhead or something, and he kept parrying it, and it really made me think, like, you know what? I like V-Trigger 1 better. I mean, you could still use V-Trigger 2 if the Akuma doesn't know how to stop it or can't anti-air it, then go for it, but, back heavy punch is a thing, DPs are a thing, his parry's a thing, and I think the general rule with Falke and V-Trigger 2 is if they have a parry, it's not worth it. I don't think it's really worth it. Most Akumas actually don't know that they can just parry to beat it, but the point is, I fought someone who did, and I fought him enough that it convinced me V-Trigger 1's the way. I've been using V-Trigger 1 since, and honestly, it feels really good. It's not made me think that, I'm stuttering here, but basically, I replaced V-Trigger 2 with V-Trigger 1, and the matchup is the same. If I need to make a comeback, I still felt really good using V-Trigger 1. So I'm fairly confident in this. I think this is the best way to go. I can see the argument for VT2, V-Skill 2. I can see the argument for using V-Skill 1 to absorb his air fireball and give him a little knockdown and get some Oki. Like there's reasons, but I don't think you need the V-Skill 1 to beat air fireball because you could just walk forward and DP him. You'll trade, but the trade's in your favor by 10 damage, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Or you could just EX DP and not even worry about it. So yeah, I think that's the way to go. You could do VT2 V-Skill 1 to reflect his V-Trigger 1 fireballs. That's also viable, but then I just think having V-Skill 2 out is more comfortable because a lot of Akumas, they try to just like kind of run away and then try to like jump in on you or throw a fireball. So you could probably get raw V-Skill 2 out quite a bit versus the character. Just be careful if they're walking forward. Guile, I don't like Sonic Booms, so we VT2 V-Skill 1 beats his VT1 and his V-Skill 1. Now with the V-Trigger 2 buffs, this actually might change for me, and I might go to a V-Skill 2 V-Trigger 1. I played a few matches V-Skill 2 V-Trigger 1 versus Guile. It did not feel good. It felt pretty bad, and I should say it didn't feel bad, but the thing is the V-Trigger 2, if you get cornered by Guile, it's a great way out, right? If you're in VT2, it allows you to reflect his booms, which is pretty good. It also gives you the overhead, which yes, they could easily flash kick or crouching heavy punch. I think the VT2 actually might beat his crouch heavy punch, but flash kicks are definitely, or EX flash kicks are definitely a thing. But it's also kind of a good way to bait out his meters. So for me, I've always done it. I've always done it with VT2 V-Skill 1. I think you can almost play any combination and be fine versus Guile, honestly. This one, I feel like, is kind of close to being... It doesn't really matter, but for me, I still feel confident that this is the correct choice. Abukers. VT2, V-Skill 2. V-Skill 1, I don't think is really good for her versus her, because... Sure, I guess you could beat Air Kunai, but you could also just air-to-air her, you know what I mean? And V-Skill 2 gives you control versus her, and I think that's way more important. The reason why I'm not playing V-Trigger 1 is because, it's not just because of EXDP, it's just, she could just command dash and avoid it, and I'm just not going to allow that to happen. It's the same reason why, for Fang, basically, right? She has a command dash, makes V-Trigger 1 just a little bit harder to use. Not saying it's unplayable or unviable. We look at Rampapoyo and we go, okay, he uses V-Skill 1, V-Trigger 1 for everything, and the guy is mad successful, so obviously V-Trigger 1 can definitely work. But I think this is just the correct way to go, as I do with all of these, obviously. Damage output, in case you're cornered, right, it gets you out. And she's a low health character, so adding more damage onto your normals and having a plus overhead to a character that has low health, I think is very powerful. Jury. V-Trigger 1 is just really, really bad versus Jury. Her V-Skill 1, when it's charged, beats it. Her EX Flip Kick beats it. It's kind of hard to use versus Jury, honestly, at least a Jury that's on point. V-Trigger 2, corner, you're out, damage, etc., etc. I just think by default you have to play that. V-Skill 1, it doesn't stop her low fireball. It's not really going to give you anything, so it's just by kind of default you got to play VT2 and V-Skill 2. I've tried V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1. V-Trigger 1 is okay, but it feels real bad when you go for like what you think is like a sneaky, jump into the V-Trigger 1. They just EX flip kick you and then DP you, and then they get Oki, and you're like, oh, oops. Ken. Ken's an interesting one. Because I play Ken at V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 2, right? Because I think, same reasons as the others. You're cornered, you're in, boom. Ken, of all the Shotos, I think is the hardest matchup for her. I have thought that since last season. Season 4, I think it was Akuma was the hardest, and I think that has definitely changed to Ken. I think Ken actually slightly beats Falke this season. I think it's like, at worst, I think it's 5.5. It's definitely not a 6-4 or anything like that, but this matchup does not feel good playing it. It never feels like you're winning, because Ken is a damage and Oki monster, so he's very dangerous. I think but I used to also play VT1, VC1, and I found good success with that. I think Ken this season, you can play whatever you like versus Ken. I still think this is optimal. This is the system I'm going to use. I'm going to use V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2. I think V skill 1 absorbing his fireballs. I don't think it really matters, but it does stop the the slow fireball and then into the V skill run kick. So that's the use of V skill 1. It's very very good. It builds your V trigger, right? V skill 2 is just again for more control, because if they try to do that, I just set out the orb and then I'll jump back and I'll do a shot and I'll stop it anyways, and it puts them more in block so I can poke him with like a forward heavy punch. So I'm gonna leave him in VT2 V skill 2, but I think honestly I think it's probably more here is where he belongs. So actually, you know what? I'm gonna put him here. I think it doesn't matter this season. I think everything is pretty viable versus him. Kage. A V skill 2, V trigger 1. The reason why I'm not playing V trigger 2, even though he's a low health character, damage output is nicer. I don't think you need the overhead can be beaten by his crouch heavy punch and DP, but it's more just like he has like a really solid normal versus V trigger 2, so it's very easy to react to it with it. So that's like the main reason. I think you could. Honestly, this is where I play him. I play V skill 2, V trigger 1. V skill 2 actually makes Kage mad uncomfortable. It also covers, so if you have it on the screen and he's using his V skill 1 to poke through like your forward heavy punch or your crouch medium punch, which by the way you can beat his V skill 1 with your crouching medium kick. This allows you to get 2 hits, so it'll always break his V skill 1. So I think that's kind of important for the matchup. V skill 1 doesn't really get you a whole lot, but same as kind of Ken, you can kind of like this is personally what. This is the system I use versus him. But I think realistically, you could play whatever you want and be okay. Because Falke wins the matchup pretty convincingly on the ground and has really great options versus Kage. So I don't think her V system matters all that much. It's just down to preference. But it's just, again, I prefer V skill 2, V trigger 1. Colleen, V skill 2, V trigger 1. The reason why you, same thing, right? He's good control on her. She can deal V trigger 1 with her EX Vanity step. However, it's kind of a hard reaction. You can also trick her by jumping at her and then canceling. The problem with V Trigger 2 in this matchup is it's very easy for her to react with her crouch heavy punch, or worse, which gives her Oki and everything, is parry. So that's like the sole reason I don't use V Trigger 2. That's where I would have Colleen. Karen, I use V Skill 2, V Trigger 2. Similar thing to Ibuki and Fang, there's a command dash, so she could react to your jump with a command dash, punish you on the way down. Not very good of a V-trigger. Again, you don't always have to use V-trigger 1 just to jump at someone and shoot the shots either. Like, you could push someone out just by, doing like a target combo into V-trigger 1 or something, or a crouch medium kick. However, I like having, especially when she has no meter, if you're like close to full screen, you can get V-Skill 2 out pretty reliably. Yes, she can go into Orochi, but I think the risk reward is still kind of really in the favor to try it. V Trigger 2, get cornered. Karen has actually a hard time dealing with V Trigger 2, so she doesn't have a normal that really beats it. She has to spend meter to DP it, so I think it's really powerful in that sense. That's why I play V Skill 2, V Trigger 2 versus her. Laura, it's like the exact same thing, right? She has too much. I think she has too much good movement. Her EX command grab goes through projectiles, so you could potentially go for V Trigger 1, and a good Laura could just wait to react to the jump, see the V Trigger 1, or just see the jump and then just go for read the V Trigger 1, go for EX command grab, or react to the V Trigger 1 coming out and just and then EX command grab goes through, punishes you, she gets Oki, you could lose. Laura also is a corner monster, so having a V Trigger 2 that gives us a animation and gets us out of there is really important. V Skill 2 for control, because unless she's within elbow distance or she has a meter for EX elbow, you can kind of get raw orb out pretty decently. Don't want to be too predictable with it, but you could totally do it, so I think that's optimal. Manat, you absolutely have to play V Skill 2, V Trigger 1. I don't think V Trigger 2 is viable versus Manat. Her crouching heavy punch blows it up way too easily. I think her V Skill 1 could also potentially blow it up. It might be too slow, but her crouching heavy punch definitely does, and that's way too easy of an anti-air for that. Also, if they're really on point, you might get soul thrown. They could also block and then V reversal, which I do think you'd get a forward heavy punch into V Trigger 2 punish, but then you don't get much after that. It's better to get the forward heavy punch into V Trigger 1 because you dash up your plus, right? That's kind of like the big difference. Um, Also, she has a hard time without using EX meter for EX soul throw. She has a really hard time dealing with V Trigger one, and the reason why you can use V Skill one to reflect Manat's orb back at her and build some meter, but V Skill 2 actually puts like the fear of her, because Falke has a hard time without meter dealing with the dive kicks, so it actually puts a little bit of fear on the screen for Manat and it actually forces her back. So if you can corner Manat, it's a pretty easy matchup because you just mix up with either jump shot or forward heavy punch, and you usually can beat her that way. So good Manats, however, know this and they will actually play very, very aggressive. So just look out for that. But I think this is the optimal V system for her. Necalli. Necalli's a weird one. I'm not too well versed in the Necalli matchup, so I play V Skill 2 V Trigger 1. I'm honestly, I will be 100% honest, I am not sure. I don't have much experience in the matchup, not at a high level where I think it would matter, so I don't really know on this one. I see some people play VT2 V Skill 2, which I could totally see. I just wouldn't because I find every Necalli I face has really good anti-air reactions, so I find that VT2 probably not as reliable as a V Trigger one, but I it and I just don't think V Skill 1 does anything for you. So I think V Skill 2 is absolutely correct. I just think the V Trigger is probably just down to your preference. Nash, VT2, V Skill 1. Reason being, easy to get, if he tries to run away and throw slow booms, you could V Skill 1. If he tries to moonsault, the V Skill 1 will hit him. At least I believe so. Pretty sure. Yeah, actually, no, I'm fairly confident in that. If you're in V Trigger 2, you can reflect his booms back at him and then dash behind it and go for an overhead or something. So you can get some pressure on him. If he does corner you, he's not a corner monster, but it's nice to have a V Trigger that you can activate your way out of. Also, the damage output is nice if you do need to make a comeback versus him. Yeah, I think you could also play V Trigger 1 and be absolutely fine. The only thing in the matchup is when you use either V Trigger, he could just block either V Trigger and just be reversal out, so that's kind of annoying. But I like having V Trigger too because it gives the option of the overhead, and just the ability to reflect fireballs with V Trigger 2 V Skill 1 versus a fireball character I think is kind of important. Lady Mika. Okay. So it depends, right? If they're playing V Skill 1, V Trigger 1, I think this is probably better. But I think overall, V Skill 2, V Trigger 1 is much better. V Skill 2, obviously, for control, right? Because the reason why I would say V Trigger 2 is okay in this matchup is because she's, I think, Mika's 950 health, so damage output could matter. The reason why I like V Trigger 1 more is, even if I get cornered, all I have to do is just, especially now, is just, do a crouch medium kick, okay, activate. Now I'm going to do a target combo, push out, into V Trigger 1, push out, do a crouch medium kick right after, because there's no button she can mash. Do V Trigger 1 again. You could push yourself out. I think most of the time you should be winning neutral if you're playing it correctly. So I don't think you need the V Trigger 2 for the comeback because you're losing a lot, so I think V Trigger 1 is better. So yeah, I think V Skill 2, V Trigger 1 for Rainbow Mika. Rashid. Okay, so last season V Trigger 2 was the whole thing, right? This was last season, right? V Trigger 2, V Skill 1, because it beats his V Trigger 2. I have fought only a few Rashids. Most of them are still using V Trigger 2, V Skill 1. This unfortunately doesn't reflect his V Trigger 1. The reason why I wouldn't play V Trigger 1 versus Rashid is because he can just roll through it with V Skill 1, and that sucks. And same thing, right? He is the corner monster of the game. So having a way out with the V Trigger is activation on hit is very nice. Also, if you need to make a comeback, the damage output. Most Rashids I find aren't really able to deal with the V Trigger 2 thing very well. Maybe he doesn't have a great button for it, so I think that's the way to go. I think it's if you don't know your opponent's layout, I think that's the safe way to go. If you do know your opponent's layout, I think you could totally do VT2 and V Skill 2 and be fine. But I think if you don't know, your best bet is still to do VT2 and V Skill 1, just because it does counter at least half of his options. So half of his, at least one of his V triggers, right? Half of his options. So that's pretty good. Ryu. So last season I had Ryu as VT1, V skill 1. I have since changed my opinion, like I said at the beginning of the video. Mostly thanks in part to the Falke Discord and the new potency with V skill 2 and V trigger 1, because EX shots, when you hit an EX shot, right, you get sent out a V skill 2. So if you're like full screen, you do he throws a fireball, you low shot, and then you do it, and then you cancel into EX, right? He's full screen, get a V skill 2 out, more control. I find it's very potent. I find you get V skill 2 out as soon as you have like one bar versus Ryu pretty frequently, even if you're like, because a lot of Ryus try to like back away for a bit at first, you know, to space themselves, so you can usually get a V skill 2 out. I think it's really powerful. I think this season, with how potent it is with the EX shots and just being able to cancel like target combo into V trigger 1, crouching medium kick, stand light kick, heavy kick even, I think it's just so much better to play V skill 2, V trigger 1 versus Ryu. V skill 2 and V trigger 1 also for the king, Sagat. Sagat is slow, so having a slow moving character who's tall V skill 2 is amazing. Very, very powerful. Why are we playing V trigger 1? Because we can react to any fireball and get really good damage. This is like one of Falke's best matchups. Very good matchup for her. You should almost always have the life lead, so you can even use V trigger 1, not even necessarily to like, oh, I gotta make sure I hit him. You could just use it to do like forward heavy punch, V trigger 1, delay, maybe button again, V trigger 1, or you could jump and do a V trigger 1 and just get like a bunch of chip with it. And if he's already losing, you're putting more and more pressure on top of him. So I think it's very potent for that. If you do need to make a comeback, again, he's tall, so V trigger 1 forces that stun, lets you get in, allows you to get like a mix up going. Very important. Yeah, so, I mean, you could play V trigger 2 versus Sagat, but I also think, like, there's no way you're fighting a Sagat that can't anti-air pretty decently, so I don't think it's a good idea. And I just don't think it's necessary. You could play V skill 1 to absorb fireballs, but instead of absorbing fireballs, it's just better to do, your low shot, your low Kugel under it, so way better, and it's really easy to get V skill 2 out versus Sagat. Because he has to be within space to hit you with a Tiger Knee, and he has to be looking for it. And I don't think most Sagats are, because they're either trying to like somehow throw fireballs at you from like a distance they're comfortable, which is them just completely losing, or they're trying to rush you down, which is very hard for Sagat to do. So it's very, very potent V system. Sakura, it does not matter. Play whatever you like. I play V skill 2, V trigger 1, just because of how potent it is and it feels really good. But you totally could play V trigger 1, V skill 1, so that way when she's in her V trigger, you can reflect her fireballs back at her. That's really good. You could absorb her normal fireballs. You'd get an overhead. I'm not sure how well she can deal with overhead besides DPing it on reaction. I don't know if her crouch heavy punch allows her to beat the overhead. I'm not too sure. It might. Right, but still, even being able just to reflect the fireballs is really good. V skill 2, you can't get out raw a lot of the time, but I just find that it's really good to just have that extra option for control if you can get it out. Plus, if you do hit like a target combo into it, that's pressure, that's good. You get like a stun combo, you could go into target combo, put the low orb on her, pop it, then you're plus 32, and she has to eat like a really insane mix-up. So I think that's why I would do V skill 1, V trigger 1. But again, I don't think it really matters. I think you just play what you're comfortable with in this matchup, and you'll be fine. Okay, Urien. Dead boy Urien. At least that's what everyone says, right? I played this V system last season. I'm still playing it this season. V skill 2, V trigger 1. Reason why I'm not picking V trigger 2, his crouch heavy punch is still really, really, really good. Last season I also would have said N because EX headbutt, but I actually think because of the insane nerf to EX headbutt, V trigger 2 is a lot more viable versus Urien. I think you could even get away with it. But I prefer V trigger 1 because a lot of the time I fight Urien, I mostly have the life lead. Shoutouts to Troll Panga. He's like the only Urien that I fight consistently that like pretty much whoops me every time. So shoutouts to him. I think he's like his decision making is like super good. So shoutouts to that guy. But I still think it's correct. Urien's a tall character, so hard for him to do. It's kind of hard for him to deal with V trigger 1. He has no, like his armor doesn't, like, V Trigger 1 blows up his armor, V Trigger 2 does not, right? So that's also an added bonus. It also lets you just V reversal and V shift a lot if you need to in the matchup, right? It allows you just to use V meter without having to worry, because it's pretty easy to get a life lead on Urian. If he tries to gets V skill 2 or something and throw fireballs, or he gets V skill 1, you can just low shot him. You just poke him with crouch medium punch, forward heavy punch, right? He's only dangerous if he gets in. I don't think when he corners you, I think it's just safer to have the V Trigger 1 route over the V Trigger 2. However, I don't feel that way about Bison. V Skill 1. So, the only reason why you'd ever play V Skill 1 is if you played V Trigger 2 to beat his EX Fireball. But because you should. Because ideally, if you're playing the matchup correctly, you won't really be in a range where that's going to matter. Or if he just tries to do it full screen, you can just low shot him, like dash up, just block it, maybe V shift away after, or just eat the throw or something. Like, I just don't think it's that deadly of a thing. V Trigger 2, because if you do get cornered by Bison, it is very hard to get out. And now with the invincibility to EX doubles reverse, I find V Trigger 1 probably not the best. I think V Trigger 1's okay versus Bison, though. I think it's okay. But I still prefer V Trigger 2 just because of the corner situation. And it's a pretty good comeback factor, and he doesn't have like a really good answer to it in time. Like his crouch heavy punch, I believe, is too slow to really counter it. So I think V Trigger 2 is just better. Zangief, same reason why all the tall boys are pretty much going here. V Skill 2 is you can get V Skill 2 out versus Zangief like raw pretty easily. You counter hit him with a forward heavy punch. You push him away with like stand medium kick. Into gunshot, into EX gunshot. Even if he blocks it, that's fine, because usually he's pushed back far enough that you can get a V-Skill 2 out without concern. V-Skill 2 is insanely good versus Zangief. V-Trigger 1 is insanely good. V-Trigger 1, I do believe it blows through his V-Skill 1. It might not, but if it doesn't, it adds a whole crap ton of gray life. You can just forward heavy punch into V-Skill 1, and that'll beat his forward heavy punch. I guess and the reason why you wouldn't play V-Trigger 2, even though he can do this to your V-Trigger 1, is just because of Lariat. Lariat's too easy of an anti-air to beat V-Trigger 2, and then he gets Oki and he's on top of you, and it's your comeback factor is now screwing you, so I just don't see the point in that. So yeah, plus he's tall, so V-Trigger 1 could be like pretty good. Just make sure you don't do it within range where he can V-Trigger 1 activate and punish you. That's like the only major thing. Moving on to Zeku. I can't believe they keep buffing you. V Trigger 2, V Skill 2. Reason being, he tries to get like an animal out. You could get your V Skill 2 out in time and still block. Against old Zeku, it's really strong and powerful. V Skill 1, it just doesn't. It's just, I think, useless. It doesn't, unless you're playing V Skill 1 and V Trigger 1. There is no point to V Skill 1. The reason why I don't play V-Trigger 1 is his V-Trigger 2 beats it. And in the matchup, I find most Zekus play V-Trigger 2. By the way, his V-Trigger 2 also beats our V-Trigger 2. So don't just raw go for overhead. But it also makes all the pokes damage more and allows you to get Oki. So I think that's really, really important. It also makes it so, like, if you anti-air him, right, if he jumps at you and you get the anti-air, now you can cancel it down plus VT2 and you get a lot more damage and you get Oki, right? I think it's really important. I guess you could play V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 and be okay. I just prefer VT2, V-Skill 2 myself. Gil. Gil is another one. Last season I had him here, right? Build up your meter quicker with V-Skill 1 and then go into V-Trigger 1. And I still think this still might be the best way, but currently I am playing it as V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1, and it feels really good. Because it makes Gil very hesitant to just like kind of throw something out. So I think this is okay to play. I think this is good. I think this might be slightly better, but I find this is working really well for me, and I've been enjoying this, so I'm going to put him here, but realistically, I think here's also pretty good. The reason why, if you're wondering why you don't play V-Trigger 2, is he has a parry, and he has a good crouch fierce, and a good back heavy. And there's just too many good anti-air options that are fast, so we're not doing that. We're not going to punish ourselves. Another V-Skill 2 V-Trigger 1 matchup, Mr. Honda. Why are we not playing Why are we not playing V Trigger 2? Because Headbutt beats it. And EX Headbutt beats it. So I just don't think it's good. I don't think it's very good. V Trigger 1, also, he has a very thick hurt box, right? He has a really wide, thick hurt box, so it also, if you do V trigger one shots and he tries to like EX headbutt away or something, or try to counter the EX headbutt, you blow it up, you land, you get the forward heavy punch, stand shot, low shot, boom, very good damage. Allows you to get an Oki. The reason why you're playing V skill 2 is because there's no real use for V skill 1, so you're just kind of playing that by default. If you get the target combo into it, it's very powerful versus Honda, because if he tries to EX headbutt or EX anything, well, actually, only headbutt that could get him out of a situation. You actually blow through his 2 hits of armor, so it just kind of blows that whole option up. So it's really, really good. I guess you could play V Trigger 2 and be okay, especially because he's a charge character and he's crouching a lot. So there's a reason for it, but I just prefer this. I've always played this setup, and it's worked pretty well for me, so I'm gonna stick to it. Lucia, I've been experimenting with V skill 1 or V skill 2 V trigger 1. However, I still think V skill 1 and V trigger 1 is the right way. Absorb her fireballs, get yours faster. If you're wondering why don't you play V trigger 2, because her crouch heavy punch beats it. Her stand medium punch can anti-air too, so I'm not sure if it actually beats her V trigger 2 overhead or not. But I have fitted Cap enough, and every time I fight him, I always pick V skill 1, V trigger 1. Shoutouts to him, by the way, follow him on Twitch. And I always, but while I play him, I'm always thinking I'm thankful I don't have V trigger 2, because the arc of her DP will like completely destroy Falke, right? There's also that. V trigger 1 also, she doesn't really have a good way around V trigger 1, so I think it's really, really potent to just play that. And if she tries to like throw fireballs at you, it's good to have the V skill 1. It also allows you to get a lot of good chip sequences versus Lucia, which could matter because she has low health. I just don't think V Trigger 2 is viable. You could play V Skill 2, but in my experience, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So I would rather just play V Skill 1 and V Trigger 1. Poison, you absolutely have to play V Skill 2 and V Trigger 1. You could play V Skill 1 because it does beat the startup of her whip. It only does 10 damage, but allows you to dash up and get Oki on her, so there is the reason for that, but you can't like really react to the whip whiffing and then doing V skill 1. So, and if you did do that, you'd probably just do stand heavy punch anyways, or a stand medium kick into catapult. So I don't think you need the V skill 1. The V skill 2 is if she tries to like play like a full screen game, it just forces her back more, which is really powerful. Most of the time when you do that, though, they will try to react with her love me tenders, so gotta be careful of that. The reason why you play V Trigger 1 is because V Trigger 2, she has way too many strong anti-airs. Crouch medium punch beats it. The only time that I've ever done this and it worked was I got them to V reversal, and I did something and I canceled into the V Trigger 2 overhead, and they V reversaled to something. I think it was stand medium kick into the gunshot. And they V reversal, but I canceled the gunshot into V Trigger 2, and it beat the V reversal. So that's like the only use I can really see for it. You fight any decent poison. They all pretty much just, they say you leave the air crouch medium punch, right? I don't think you're really going to blow up poison with an air move, so I think it's kind of useless. If she does try that with V Trigger 1, though, you get a full combo conversion, and you still have 2/3 of your V Trigger bars, so I think that's just better. Seth, I play VT2, V Skill 2. Low health, Seth's a corner monster, so good way to get out with V Trigger 2. V Skill 1 doesn't really have a use, can't really use it against Seth effectively, so you're kind of playing V Skill 2 by default. It's also pretty decent for control, because if once you get comfortable with V skill 2 and you notice the ranges where you can play, you could just play you can just know, oh, I can get it out here and not get punished or whatever, right? It takes a lot of time to get used to, but you can get it raw if they give you the space, and if not, like I said, there's target combo into it. The forward heavy punch crush counter, you get the V skill 2 out, you walk with the bubble, you gain more space, so it's harder for Seth to corner you, so I think it's pretty good. For Dan, I play V skill 2, V trigger 1. I think you can play V trigger 2 as well, honestly. I think, you know what? It don't matter. I think the only thing you shouldn't do is probably you shouldn't play. Actually, I think if you play V Trigger 2, V 1, I think you do reflect as V Trigger 1. So for Dan, just play whatever you're comfortable with. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so for Rose, I'd like to experiment with this because this I think might be more powerful. But for now, I'm still playing V Skill 1, V Trigger 1 to absorb her Fireball, get my V Trigger faster. I still think that's pretty good versus her. I definitely think there's an argument for V Skill 2. I 100% believe so. I need to experiment more this season, like with her buffs. Like last season, V Skill 1, V Trigger 1 felt very powerful for me to use. So I like the feeling of that. But this season, it's kind of eh. I'm not too sure with her buffs. I'm not too sure. So we're gonna have to see how things go. But for now, I think V Skill 1's correct. I think you can play V Skill 2 and be fine as well. The reason why you don't do V Trigger 2, you fight a good Rose. They are going to scarf you, and so you're going to go for your overhead, and they're going to react with the anti-air scarf, right? Their DP, which gives them Oki. So your combat factor is giving them a comeback or getting them out of the corner or something. I just don't think it's good. And V Trigger 1, I mean, yes, they can scarf that too, but it's a lot harder, and you can do it from like a further out range to force them to jump, and then you can anti-air them and get some damage going as well. So I just think utility wise, and like realistically in the matchup, V Trigger 1's just better. It's not perfect, but it's better. Akira, I play V Skill 2, V Trigger 1. I think you can play V Skill 1 and V Trigger 1 and be okay, just for like going into like V Trigger 1 stuff. But like V Skill 2 is just better because you can get the control. If she's like, like, we all know how Akira's play. They walk, in and out of ranges and things, and they like to try to, with me at least, they try to like walk in and out of forward heavy punch range to try to whiff punish, which is pretty cool. But when they do that, I think, okay, as long as they're not A, looking for it, and B, don't have EX elbow, I can just kind of get my V Skill 2 out, which is pretty powerful, and push her back, right? Or I can even potentially get some kind of like pressure going, where like I do like a neutral jump medium punch, pop the bubble on them, they're in blocks, and I dash up, now I've got pressure. I might just do light pressure to get more chip, but that's still more damage onto her overall. The reason why you don't play V Trigger 2, she has two pretty decent anti-air normals. Her stand medium kick, I think, just beats V Trigger 2. Crouch heavy punch, I think, does, and she also has DP, so you fight anyone good, again, it's not really going to work out. And then she's going to get Oki, and she's going to be on top of you. It's just better to have V Trigger 1 and be like, okay, well, how does she punish V Trigger 1? Well, she might react to the jump and jump in. Okay, but every character can do that, so okay. But if you're winning with V Trigger 1, you could just activate and just use it to push her back. It's very good. The only argument I think for V Trigger 2 is because if Akira corners you, right? But in my experience, it doesn't really come up all too much, and I've never had a match where I'm like, oh, if I had V Trigger 2, but I think you could play V Trigger 2 and be fine. Again, I've not really tested those normals, so I could be completely wrong, but V Skill 2, V Trigger 1, the new potency this season just feels really strong versus her. Okay, so going on to Oro. I've not really lagged a whole bunch against Oro, but I've done V Skill 2, V Trigger 1, and it's felt pretty good. Because I think V Trigger 2 is just bad versus him. The only reason being is that he can easily just like the angle that his uppercut hits, or his anti-air special. Sorry, it's not really an uppercut, but it looks like one, right? I find it just too powerful for V Trigger 2. I think V Trigger 2 is just kind of useless at that point. He also has a decent crouch heavy punch, so it's kind of I don't think it's good. I'm not sure if V Trigger 2 beats his crouch heavy punch or not, but I know that his anti-air special does, and they're always crouching, and it's just, I guess you could say the same thing about Guile, but at least, the V-Skill 1 utility is good. The only reason to play V-Trigger 2 is to play with V-Skill 1. However, I find it more effective to have the V-Skill 2 orb out. You can get it out in a distance where you can get your V-Skill 2 out, and as he's trying to go for his V-Skill 1, you can actually low-shot him out of it. So, it's really powerful that way. V-Trigger 1, just again, it's just a really good comeback factor. He doesn't, besides trying to jump like every other character can do, he doesn't have the best way of trying to get in. And Luke. Again, he is V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1. Reason being, if you go full screen, Luke's fireballs cannot hit you except for EX or V-Trigger 1, so you can always get a V-Skill 2 out without getting punished. The reason why you're playing V-Trigger 1 is because if you jump, if you fought Luke's, they like to try to anti-air with their V-Trigger 1. If they try to do that, you could just V-Trigger 1 in the air. You'll land and be okay. It'll hit them, and then you could low V-Trigger 1 shot again, and then damage extension. So it just kind of counters his V-Trigger 1, which is, I think, really important. And you're not playing V-Skill 1 because you're never, like... you're not really going to be able to react to his fireball with it, really. I think you can play V-Trigger 1 and V-Skill 1 and be fine. V-Trigger 2, the only argument, again, is if you're cornered, but I just don't think, like, his overall toolkit, I still think V-Trigger 1 just beats it more than what V-Trigger 2 could do. Also, every Luke I know can DP pretty well, so the fear of God is in me with V-Trigger 2, so yeah, I think V-Skill 2 and V-Trigger 1 is the way to go. Anyways, guys, this is just my opinion on what I think Season 6 is going to be like. If any of this changes, I'll do like an updated video or whatever, but I think this is correct. This feels right. Again, I could be wrong. If you're more comfortable playing a different system versus the character, of course, play that system. Do whatever you like. But I think this is pretty right. But again, just play what you're comfortable with and experiment. We got a lot of good changes this season. I really would highly recommend playing V-Skill 2, V-Trigger 1 versus what I have here. I think you'll really, really like it. It feels so good this season. So, yeah, guys, hope you like it. Make sure you follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/freakygames, same as my YouTube. And I'm recording this on Good Friday, so happy Easter, everybody. Peace.